Imagine finding yourself alone in an ancient castle in Italy's Aosta Valley on a stormy night. The sound of the wind moves between the thick stone walls, the corridors are swallowed by darkness, and the rain outside lashes against the windows of a structure that has stood for centuries. Then, suddenly, an unusual light appears in the room. Within it, you can make out the figure of a woman. She addresses you not by your own name, but by one you have never used before, Ibleto. She then tells you to investigate a place near an old tower in a distant city, implying that documents belonging to a nobleman who lived many years ago can be found there. You follow her directions and claim that in that very area, you gain access to private family records concerning a medieval figure mentioned in history books. This was the central event in the story told by Giuseppe Costa. Yet, what made the story intriguing was not merely the figure he claimed to have seen in a castle. According to Costa, it had all begun much earlier, when he was still a small child. Giuseppe Costa is believed to have been born around 1880 in the town of Gonzaga in northern Italy. He later became an engineer and grew into an educated man with an interest in history. In a book he published many years later, however, he wrote that he had come to believe that certain scenes appearing in his mind since childhood were not ordinary fantasies. In his family home, there was a painting depicting Constantinople and the Bosphorus. Costa claimed that when he looked at it, he saw more than a painted cityscape. Vivid scenes of armed men, ships, banners, and a distant military expedition appeared in his mind. According to his account, the city's towers, golden domes, ships moving across the water, and soldiers preparing for battle seemed far more intense than the fleeting imaginings of an ordinary child. An important problem, however, emerges from the very beginning. The painting Costa regarded as the source of these mental images may already have contained ships, city walls, Eastern architecture, and a historical atmosphere. When a child stares at such a picture for a long time, imagination can fill in the details beyond the frame. The child may invent battle scenes, transform the ships in the harbor into a military expedition, and turn the depicted city into a living story. Childhood images alone, therefore, could not be regarded as memories of a previous life. But the events described by Costa did not end there. At around the age of 10, he traveled to Venice with his father. Although he was seeing the city for the first time, he said he experienced a strange sense of familiarity. The canals, stone buildings, squares, and harbor did not seem foreign to him. He felt as though he had been there before, walked along the same streets, and traveled across the same waters. A dream he claimed to have had that night strengthened this feeling even further. According to Costa, he dreamed that he had embarked on a sea voyage alongside soldiers dressed in medieval clothing. They were led by a commander of about 30. One of their banners bore an image of the Virgin Mary and stars, while the others displayed red and white symbols associated with the House of Savoy. The ships departed from a harbor, the troops traveled across the sea, then landed and entered into a violent battle. At the end of the journey, Costa saw himself as part of a military expedition that had reached Constantinople. Years later, he came to believe that this dream was connected to a medieval nobleman whose life he investigated, Ibleto di Challant. Ibleto was a genuine historical figure. He served the House of Savoy, held military and administrative positions, and was an important member of the powerful Challant family of the Aosta Valley. He rose within the Savoy administration during the reign of Amadeus VI and became influential in Verrès and the surrounding region. Historical sources confirm that Amadeus VI led a military expedition eastward in 1366. During the campaign, Savoyard forces traveled by sea, captured Gallipoli, and became involved in political developments surrounding Constantinople. The Savoy banners, sea voyage, and Eastern military expedition Costa claimed to have seen in his dream therefore had a historical basis. Yet the fact that a historical event truly occurred does not mean that a dream about it must have been a memory of a previous life. The Savoyard expeditions were described in regional history books, school lessons, and popular accounts. Given that Costa grew up in northern Italy, came from an educated family, and later developed an interest in history, it was possible that he had encountered this information without consciously remembering it. Human memory can sometimes separate information from its original source. A person remembers a detail but forgets where it was learned. This can create the impression that the information appeared spontaneously. That was one of the most important questions surrounding Costa's story. Had he really described these details as a child before possessing any prior knowledge? Or had he combined historical information acquired years later with his childhood memories? Costa wrote that, as an adult, he developed a special interest in weapons, horse riding, and fencing. He later served in the Royal Piedmont Cavalry Regiment and spent some time in Vercelli. An experience in Vercelli was presented as another detail strengthening the connection with Ibleto. Costa claimed that when he entered the Church of St. Andrea, he felt an inexplicable and overwhelming sense of unease and remorse. Inside the church, he felt oppressed, as though he were responsible for something that had happened there in the past. Years later, while examining historical documents, he learned that Ibleto di Challant had been involved in a serious conflict with Giovanni Fieschi, the Bishop of Vercelli. Historical records do indeed report that in 1377, Ibleto's forces captured the bishop and held him at Montjovet. The incident reportedly created severe tensions between Ibleto and the church and ultimately led to his excommunication. Costa connected the remorse he had felt at Sant'Andrea with this historical event. Yet this association also lacked independent evidence. Unease inside a church may arise from the building's dark atmosphere, a person's state of mind, religious associations, or information acquired beforehand. Nor can it be established with certainty whether Costa already knew the historical details concerning the bishop before visiting the church. The most dramatic part of the case was the event said to have taken place at Verrès Castle. Costa described experiencing different emotions while visiting historical castles in the Aosta Valley. At Ussel Castle, he felt sadness. At Venice, he experienced no particular reaction. But when he reached Verrès, he said he was overwhelmed by a powerful combination of affection, familiarity, and remorse. Verrès Castle was historically closely connected to Ibleto di Challant. Sources indicate that the castle's present military appearance took shape largely during his lifetime and that the structure underwent extensive reconstruction during the 1380s. For those who supported the past life interpretation, Costa's intense sense of familiarity upon entering the castle was significant. Yet the architecture, dark chambers, and historical atmosphere of an ancient castle can provoke powerful emotional responses in visitors. These feelings may become even more intense when a person is interested in the castle's history or arrives with particular expectations. According to Costa, a storm forced him to spend the night at the castle. As the night progressed, he claimed that an extraordinary light appeared in the room and that a female figure emerged from it. The figure addressed him as Ibleto. She then instructed him to investigate a location near Albenga associated with an old tower. Costa also wrote that she asked him to remember her. The woman's identity was never conclusively established. Costa thought that she might have been Blanche of Savoy. Another possibility was that the figure represented Ibleto's wife, Giacometta di Chatillon, but the figure had not identified herself. These possibilities were proposed only later, after historical records had been consulted. Such an experience might also have been a vision produced in a state between sleep and wakefulness, influenced by exhaustion, fear, the storm, and the atmosphere of the castle. People sometimes see extremely vivid images or hear voices as they are falling asleep or waking up. To the person experiencing them, such episodes may feel entirely real. What distinguished this scene from an ordinary dream in Costa's story, however, was the claim that the instructions eventually led him to a document. Costa said that he traveled to Albenga, met a man named Marquis del Corredo di Balestrina, and gained access to private documents relating to the Challant family. Among these papers, he claimed, was an unpublished biography of Ibleto said to have been written by a family member named Boniface. According to Costa's account, the documents described Ibleto's military campaigns, private relationships, conflict with the Bishop of Vercelli, and duties under Savoyard rule. He believed that they contained similarities to his childhood images, his dream in Venice, and his experience at Verrès. This is where the apparently strongest aspect of the case emerged. Could Costa truly have discovered the location of a previously unknown family archive through an extraordinary experience? Had he written down the instructions he received at Verrès immediately after the event, had this record been verified by independent witnesses, and had previously unknown documents then been found in the place he described, the result would have been extremely striking. But the surviving case file contains no such prior record. There is no dated letter, diary entry, notarized statement, or independent witness testimony demonstrating that Costa's claim that he had been told to go to Albenga was recorded before he saw the documents. Nor did Stevenson's report provide a complete copy, photograph, or precise archival reference for the Albenga manuscript that could be examined today. Its contents are known largely through Costa's own summary. The detail that appears to be the most impressive is therefore also the case's most serious weakness. The possibility that Costa reorganized the narrative after experiencing all the events and seeing the documents cannot be completely excluded. The Giuseppe Costa story also differed substantially from the typical childhood cases Ian Stevenson investigated directly. In the cases Stevenson considered most significant, children generally began speaking between the ages of 2 and 4, gave specific names and locations associated with a previous life, and made statements that were sometimes recorded before the two families came into contact. Those details were then investigated. In some files, Stevenson or his colleagues documented what the child had said before attempting to verify it. No such process occurred in Costa's case. Stevenson never interviewed Costa. He did not speak with Costa's family or with anyone who had witnessed his childhood. He found no independent witness to the night at Verrès. He did not personally examine the private documents in Albenga. He evaluated the case through Costa's book, published in 1923, and a later account by Ernesto Bazzano. The chain of sources therefore depended largely on Costa's own narrative. Costa told the story, Bazzano repeated Costa's account, and Stevenson compared their publications decades later. These were not three independent witnesses. The information at the center of the story still came from the same person, Giuseppe Costa. Historical comparisons also reveal several inconsistencies. The family biography described by Costa reportedly stated that around 10,000 soldiers took part in Amadeus VI's Eastern Campaign. Reliable historical studies, however, estimate the force at approximately 2,000 men. This was not a minor numerical discrepancy. It increased the size of the army fivefold. Costa's dream combined a major battle with an entry into Constantinople. Yet the principal military success of the historical campaign was the capture of Gallipoli. Although political and military activity took place around Constantinople, there is no clear record of a great battle for the city resembling the one described by Costa. Another problem concerned the claim that Ibleto joined the campaign because of his unrequited love for Blanche of Savoy. The chronology shows that approximately 16 years separated Blanche's death from the campaign of 1366. Such a long interval weakened the proposed romantic motive. Costa's summary of the manuscript also claimed that Amadeus VII died in Ibleto's arms. Stevenson was unable to verify this detail in the other historical sources he consulted. These errors do not prove that Costa fabricated the entire story. Human memory can confuse dates, numbers, and places. But when a case is presented as historically accurate, incorrect details must be considered alongside the correct ones. Selecting only the correspondences and ignoring the errors can make a story appear stronger than it really is. It was also claimed that Costa's face resembled Ibleto's. Bazzano wrote that he saw certain similarities between Costa's features and a portrait believed to depict Ibleto. Yet this resemblance was never examined through measurements, expert analysis, or blind assessment. Facial similarity is highly subjective. Two people may appear to share the same eyebrows, nose, or facial shape. When someone is already attempting to establish a connection between two individuals, there is an increased tendency to notice similarities. The resemblance between the portrait and Costa may therefore have created a supporting impression, but it could not be considered reliable evidence. The publication of Costa's book in 1923 was important because it demonstrated that the story had at least been committed to writing by that date. However, decades separated the alleged childhood events from the book's publication. When people write about something they believe happened in childhood many years later, memory may change without their awareness. Information learned afterwards can become incorporated into the original memory. A dream that was initially vague may grow more detailed over time. A single image of a banner may, after the person learns about Savoyard symbols, become remembered as a red and white dynastic standard. A dream about a city may later be remembered as Constantinople after the dreamer reads about the historical campaign. This process does not require deliberate deception. People may sincerely believe their memories, even when those memories have been reshaped over time. Stevenson did not include the Costa case in his book because he regarded it as definitive proof of reincarnation. Rather, he wanted to demonstrate that accounts suggestive of previous lives also existed in Europe, and to examine both the strengths and weaknesses of such older cases. Stevenson openly acknowledged that the painting might have triggered Costa's childhood images, that Costa could have learned Savoyard history at school, and that some details might have come from ordinary sources of information. Even so, he believed that the claim of being directed to the Albenga documents was not easily explained. But an unexplained event does not automatically imply reincarnation. Sometimes documentation is incomplete. Sometimes the sequence in which a story developed cannot be reconstructed. Sometimes the source of information is forgotten. Sometimes coincidence, expectation, and retrospective interpretation come together within the same narrative. In Costa's case, the crucial issue was not whether Ibleto had truly lived or whether the Savoyard campaign had actually taken place. Those facts could be historically verified. The real question was when Costa had learned the relevant information. Had his childhood statements been recorded before historians and family documents were consulted, the case would have been considerably stronger. But because the records appeared only after the events, the possibility that the information was acquired through ordinary means could not be eliminated. Even so, the story is not entirely without significance. The images Costa said had recurred since childhood, the sense of familiarity he experienced in Venice, the remorse he felt in Vercelli, the intense experience at Verrès Castle, and the chain of investigation that led to Albenga form a surprisingly coherent narrative within the course of a single life. All these elements may have been assembled only in retrospect. From Costa's perspective, however, the signs that appeared at different stages of his life ultimately pointed towards a single person, Ibleto di Challant. For him, this was more than a historical interest. He believed that his childhood dreams, inexplicable emotions, and the documents he encountered as an adult all shared a common source. Today, Verrès Castle still rises above the Aosta Valley. Its stone walls, narrow windows, and severe military architecture bear traces of the age in which Ibleto lived. Ibleto's conflict with the Bishop of Vercelli, his duties under Savoyard rule, and his family's influence in the region are preserved in historical records. Whether Giuseppe Costa truly saw a female figure within those same walls remains unknown. There was no independent witness to that night, nor is it clear exactly what the Albenga manuscript contained or how much Costa knew before he found it. The case therefore leads to no definite conclusion. On one side, there is a genuine historical figure, a real castle, and an actual military expedition. On the other, there are childhood images recorded decades later, subjective feelings of familiarity, and an extraordinary nocturnal experience without an independent verification. Perhaps Costa had been influenced by the painting of Constantinople in his home, learned the history of Savoy at school, and later combined these fragments with Ibleto's biography. Perhaps a forgotten source of information gave him the impression that he was remembering something he had never learned. Or perhaps, as Costa himself claimed, the scenes that had appeared in his mind since childhood were truly scattered traces of another life. Yet, accepting that final possibility requires more than striking similarities. It also requires examining when the information was recorded and to what extent ordinary explanations can be excluded. For that reason, the Giuseppe Costa case resembles an unresolved historical mystery more than definitive proof. The story's most compelling question is not why a man came to identify himself with a medieval nobleman. The real question is what Costa knew before he actually saw the documents in Albenga. If the answer to that question could be found, it might change the meaning of the entire case. Did Costa truly discover an unknown family archive through an extraordinary set of instructions? Or did memories shaped over many years become a seemingly flawless story only after he encountered the historical documents? The stone walls of Verrès Castle offer no answer. All that remains is Costa's account, the historical record, and the unresolved gap between them.